coming up. It's one of those stranger than fiction rock and roll stories. You can't believe it's true, but it is. It's a full speed, kick you in the teeth, adrenaline fueled rocker. Song was inspired by an 80s legend who literally had a death wish. On one notorious night back in 87, this decadent rock star overdosed after a night of reckless abandon. He scared the hell out of his bandmates and his fans in the process. He was pronounced clinically dead, and rumors of his demise spread like wildfire. It would take some serious Pulp Fiction needle-piercing action just to bring him back to life. He actually said that he was out of his own body witnessing his death. And then he woke up in the hospital and he ripped out his tubes and he escaped. He bummed a ride off a couple of fans who thought that they were seeing a ghost. Then when he got home, he shot up again. Well, needless to say, the incident's aftermath led to his band's biggest song ever, and it would eventually help him get clean. The unbelievable story's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever tried to grow out your hair or get it cut like your favorite rock star to mimic them, you're going to dig this channel of musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, and you'll click the bell so you never miss out on our latest and greatest interviews coming out. I know you'll dig this channel. We also have a Patreon. You're going to want to check that out. We have full interviews there, other videos that you won't find anywhere else. Plus, you can be an honorary producer to help us to keep the music alive, and we have merch below as well. So guess what? It's time for another edition of actually my favorite show on here, Number One in Our Hearts. This show honors songs that were so undeniably great, they should have been number one on the Billboard Hot 100. But, for whatever reason, lack of marketing, radio play, label support, or just, sheer stupidity, the song came up short. Today, we're going to get into a little bit of hard rock here. We're going to tell the infamous story of Motley Crue's no-holds-barred rocker. I think their best song, really, Kickstart My Heart, from their 1989 album, Dr. Feelgood. It's an undisputable fact, Motley Crue is one of the most influential and popular metal bands of the 80s, 90s, into the new millennium. Some call them hard rock, some call them metal, whatever. Let me just give you a few stats to back all this up. Motley Crue has sold in excess of 100 million records worldwide. 6 out of their 9 studio albums have reached the Billboard Top 10, plus 3 more of their compilation albums have done that as well. Motley Crue, they've had 8 platinum or multi-platinum albums to their name. And as far as singles go, the band boasts 28 top 40 mainstream rock hits and some noteworthy Hot 100 appearances. The list is far too long to give you, but here's a taste. Motley Crue's classic lineup, of course, comprised of Nikki Sixx on bass, Tommy Lee on drums, Mick Marrs on guitar, and Vince Neil on vocals. In the 80s, they established themselves not only as rock hitmakers, but also as poster boys for heavy metal hedonism. The band is at least as famous for their extracurricular activities as for their music. Sex, drugs, criminal activities, public feuds, and later tell-all exposés, they become synonymous with the name Motley Crue. By 1987, their rock and roll decadence was kicking into high gear. Their most recent release at that time, Girls, 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 had reached number 2 on the Billboard album chart, and the title track reached number 12 on the Hot 100, their highest charter at that point. However, on December 23rd, 1987, a couple days before Christmas, it all came crashing down. That was the date of the notorious Nikki Sixx overdose incident. Okay, so just up front here, I gotta tell you that there are some discrepancies and differences in opinion about what happened, what actually happened that night. But what I'm about to give you comes from Motley Crue's various autobiographies, so this is at least the official story according to them. So that fateful night, Nikki Sixx rented a limo and he headed out for an evening of debauchery in LA. Best place to find it, I guess, in those days. Partying with the likes of Slash and Steven Adler from Guns N' Roses and also Rat's Robin Crosby. Along the way, the entourage scored enough drugs to wipe their minds blank. after their tour through the Los Angeles neon jungle, the guys staggered back to the Franklin Plaza Hotel, as it were. This is where Slash was staying at the time. This is where they met with Robin's dealer, who had a cachet of Persian heroin. Nikki Sixx, already too wasted to inject himself, he told the dealer to shoot him up. He just plunged the needle into his arm. So apparently the heroin made a beeline for Nikki's heart and exploded through his body. Instantly, Nikki Sixx turned blue and he went limp. Shortly after, Vince Neil, who was at home in bed, sound asleep, he heard his phone ring. Hello? It was the voice of Nikki's limo driver, Boris. Nikki's dead. His dealer just ran past me screaming that he killed him. Now, Vince didn't know if this was a bad dream or what. What did he just hear? Boris continued, they wheeled him out with a sheet over his face. Vince Neil hung up the phone and he started making calls. What the hell was happening? Was Nikki Sixx really dead? Was this the end of the band as they knew it? The way that he tells it, Nikki, the answer was an emphatic yes. Nikki remembers waking up to find that he was being moved through a corridor of some kind. Everything was bright and blurry. So he heard a voice saying, we're losing him. We're losing him. And then he was in an ambulance. Except there he was looking down at his own body. He was dead. He had to be. This was his body laying there on the stretcher that he was seeing. There was an EMT standing over him, frantically trying to bring him back to life. Nikki heard these words, no one's going to die in my ambulance tonight. And then there was this painful jerk and he was right back in his body. Struggling to open his eyes, Sixx saw 2 adrenaline needles sticking out of his chest. Then he promptly passed out again. That's according to him. So get this. Later, Nikki wakes up again. He's in the hospital. Tubes up his nose, an IV is in his arm. He's wearing only a pair of leather pants. So he rips out the tubes. And Nikki gave the hospital staff the finger and he just walked out. Standing half naked in the parking lot, he saw a couple of girls crying on the curb. They're actually Motley Crue fans, and word had spread that, he was dead. Looking up, they thought they were seeing a ghost. So Sixx, he bummed a ride home off these girls, and in exchange, he promised never to take drugs again. I guess this is what he promised the girls, but that promise would only last, I think, for a few minutes. Because when Sixx walked through his front door, he went right over to his answer machine and he updated his message. He said, hey, it's Nikki. I'm not home because I'm dead. Then he went to his bathroom. He pulled out a stash of heroin and he sunk a syringe into his arm. He passed out in the process. When he woke up the next day, the needle was still in his arm and the tile was covered in blood. In the distance, he heard the answer machine pick up. Hey, it's Nikki. I'm not home because I'm dead. This entire experience, it was a wake-up call for both Nikki and the whole band, really. Although, again, how much of a wake-up call it was is debatable at that moment, since after he came back from the dead, he went back to the needle immediately. But I guess as it happened as time passed. Nikki wasn't the only one with substance abuse struggles in the band. So together, they all pledged to get clean before recording their next album. Rehab, therapy, and some touchy-feely moments would all proceed. The aptly named Dr. Feelgood. Said Vince about it, that was the first time we ever recorded sober. We made a pact together and said if we're going to do it and survive as a band, we're going to be sober. Because it was always like there was one guy sober and the other guy, we're not. This was the first time we were all in the same spot. Nikki, for his part, he emerged clean from months of on and off rehab torture. That's how he put it. No more clubs, no more chasing girls. He sat down with a psychiatrist. He got on Prozac and he got into a relationship with actress and model Brandy Brandt. Said Sixx about it, found myself actually doing something productive with my time and writing songs again. The experience of the last year, it had given me more than enough material, with my near-death overdose inspiring the album's first song, Kickstart My Heart. So Nikki had wrestled with sobriety before, but this time he was writing with clarity. He was listening to his bandmates, even soliciting their opinions. Together they wrote what they thought was their best album yet. Dr. Feelgood, it was recorded in Vancouver. It was over the course of something like 9 months. was produced by the great Bob Rock, who, of course, worked with bands The Cult, Metallica, Skid Row, just to name a few. As for Motley Crue, he ran them through the ringer. In the past, the studio was ground zero for parties and chicks, but not on Bob Rock's watch. Bob was, critical, he was demanding, and he was a stickler for showing up on time. He pushed this band to their limits, and it really worked. Dr. Feelgood was their most successful album by far, went to number one on the Billboard 200. It sold over 6 million copies in the U.S. Many argue it's their best record. Dr. Feelgood, of course, it also churned out a couple of hits. Top tens, the title track. There was also Without You. And there were other successful singles as well. Don't Go Away, Mad, Just Go Away. That went to number 13 on the mainstream rock chart. And Same Old Situation, SOS, that reached number 34. But, in my opinion, and many of the faithful's opinion, really, the best song from the album is today's featured track, Kickstart My Heart. I'll give you the numbers on this one in a few minutes. Let's see if you can guess how it did in the meantime in the comments. Now, obviously, the story of Kickstart My Heart begins on that eventful December night, a few days before Christmas. But here are some more insights into its composition. So Nikki Sixx said, "It was a song I had written very quickly, and I brought it into rehearsal. I thought it was a throwaway, something that would belong on Too Fast for Love. It just really took on a life of its own, and it fit on the album a lot better than it should have." Now, during the making of Feelgood, Sixx was sitting at home. He was playing his acoustic guitar with, words scribbled on scratch paper. The song later caught the attention of the group's former manager, who told Nikki, "That thing is really cool. You should show it to the guys in the band." But you know what? Nikki Sixx, he blew off the compliment. He called it just a little power pop punk rock song. But when he showed the band, they really liked it, and it came together really fast after that. Nikki would call it a song that was never really meant to be, and he said, "Sometimes you can't see the forest from the trees as an artist." Now, remember at the beginning of this when I said that there were conflicting accounts about what inspired the song Kickstart My Heart. So Steve Adler from Guns N' Roses, he's been very vocal about what happened the night of Nikki's brush with death. He said that Kickstart My Heart song, he wrote it about the paramedics that took the syringe and did that Pulp Fiction thing to him. But they actually didn't do that. I dragged him into the shower with a cast on my hand. And I rolled him in and I put the cold water on him in the shower and I started slapping him in the face with my cast. And the next thing you know, the purple in his face has just disappeared. And then right then, the paramedics, they came in, they grabbed him out of the shower like a rag doll. They just dropped him in the living room and they just pumped his chest with their hands. And that was it. That was what happened. Now, that's what Adler says. Now, to be fair to Nikki Sixx, he claimed the Pulp Fiction syringe incident happened in the ambulance, not in the actual hotel room. So, maybe Nikki went unconscious again by the point that happened. Either way, Adler conceded that Sixx got a hell of a good song out of it, and he said it was no big deal. It is entertainment after all. Pretty big deal, I think. Now, speaking of entertainment, if you have not seen it, you got to check out the music video for Kickstart My Heart. It was one of my favorites as a teen. It's just a pure rush of adrenaline. Now, the video was filmed at the legendary Whiskey A Go-Go just before the crew set out on their Dr. Feelgood World Tour.
Look at this is it, back home, sweet home.
After arriving at the venue in an old-school ambulance dubbed Dr. Feelgood, the band gives a killer performance at the club. Intermixed with the show are shots of skydivers and cars and boats racing and wrecking. The video, like the song, it really gets you hyped up. So Kickstart My Heart, that was released as the album's second single, came out on November 20th, 1989. And it criminally underperformed. Actually topped out at number 27 on the Hot 100, and it only went to number 18 on the US mainstream rock chart, which is crazy. Internationally, Kickstart My Heart went to number 34 in Australia, and it went to number 31 in New Zealand. Again, I just don't get it. This song should have been so much bigger. Now, the good news is Kickstart My Heart, it's had a second life in the world of pop culture. I mean, it's been picked up by so many movies and TV shows. I can't even list them all here. But just a little sample, you can catch Kickstart My Heart in Doogie Howser, MD, Doogie Howser, Talladega Nights, Hot Tub Time Machine, Take Me Home Tonight, Zookeeper SWAT, Fresh Off the Boat, Lego Movie 2, Hellboy, Sprung, American Dad, Supergirl, and there's The Office. And my favorite placement is actually in season 3 of Cobra Kai, when Johnny and Daniel team up to find Johnny's son Robbie. In the process, they jump into a high-speed car chase, going after a car thief who may know where Robbie is. As the rubber hits the road, Kickstart My Heart cranks up to full blast. It is glorious. Perfect way to use that song. Now, as far as covers go, there have been a couple. Sammy Hagar, Rascal Flatts, and Steel Panther have all given it a ride. So with Dr. Feelgood, it seemed like Motley Crue could do no wrong. I mean, 5 top 40 singles on the US rock charts, 2 reaching the top 10 on the Hot 100. On tour, they sold out every show. They were on the cover of every major magazine for music. And for the first time ever, they were sober enough to enjoy it. But ultimately, it was too much of a good thing, and the band started burning out again. Elektra, they kept releasing singles and adding more dates to the tour. And the band cut the tour short at 10 months. The label was ready to send them out for another year, but with no end in sight, the guys called it off. It didn't matter how much money they made or how well the record was really doing. It was overkill for them. And to cope, the guys returned to, their old destructive habits. Once again, sowing the seeds of disaster. October 1st, 1991, Motley Crue released their first compilation album, Decade of Decadence, 81 to 91. It sold 2.5 million copies with almost no promotion, and it featured 3 singles, Primal Scream, Home Sweet Home 91, and Anarchy in the UK. Now, to support it, the label wanted to send him back out on the road. They promised him the biggest tour of the summer. But that was the last thing that these guys wanted. So it never happened. By 1992, interband tensions boiled over, and Vince Neil was actually kicked out of the band. Vince was replaced by John Corabi. It was a choice that irritated a lot of fans. Corabi shook the reins for 1994's self-titled comeback album. But even though the record reached number 7 on the charts, the revised lineup, it just didn't stick. Corabi was sacked in 96, and after a couple of years of fighting, with their label and each other, Neil returned to the band for 1997's Generation Swine. More drama followed from there. In 1999, Lee left the band, and the Crue enlisted ex-Ozzy drummer Randy Castillo. Then in 2000, they dropped their 8th studio album, New Tattoo. In 2001, the band released their notorious autobiography, The Dirt. Following the death of Castillo in 2002, the band continued bickering, but they did reunite for a 2005 tour, and then in 2008, a few years later, they released their, as of yet, final studio album, Saints of Los Angeles. That went to number 4 on the Billboard 200, and the title track, that hit number 5 on the US mainstream rock chart all those years later. We are the saints, we signed our life away. Now, throughout the new millennium, there's been more infighting, of course, including the recent and unfortunate falling out between the band and guitarist Mick Marrs. It's really sad. That being said, though, Motley Crue has put together an enviable commercial legacy. Maybe the only real accomplishment that eluded them is never having a number 1 hit on the Hot 100. So let's give it to them. We're going to rewrite some history here. The fact that Kickstart My Heart only went to number 27, again, blows my mind. Such a big drop off from the number 6 ranking of the previous single, Dr. Feelgood, who was right up there. The week Kickstart My Heart peaked at number 27. That was January 27th of 1990. And just for reference, these were the top 5 songs. Number 5, It's Two to Make It Right by Seduction. And number 4, Everything by Jody Watley. Climbing to number 3, Downtown Train by Rod Stewart. And at number 2, Pump Up the Jam by Technotronic.
Pump up the jam, pump it up while your feet are stumping.
And owning the number 1 spot at that point was How Am I Supposed to Live Without You by Michael Bolton. This one's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, having Michael Bolton at number 1 while Motley Crue is stalled at number 27 is like pouring lemon juice into an open wound. I mean, no offense to Michael Bolton.
I end up the exact same way, but it must be twice as hard for you being have the same name as him. I celebrate the guy's entire catalog. Anyway, let's get down to business.
But just look at the all-time streaming numbers since then. Kickstart My Heart, it's had just short of 700 million streams between YouTube and Spotify only. Michael Bolton's song, it's had about 422 million. The Crue, they're the clear winner here.
I'll be honest with you, I love his music. I do. I'm a Michael Bolton fan.
So let's get history right the second time around here and give that coveted top spot for 1 week to Motley Crue. You know that Kickstart My Heart deserves it. And we can't go on without mentioning the ridiculous fact that Motley Crue has been shut out of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So think about this. Motley Crue has been eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for, I believe, 18 years now. That's insane. One of the greatest rock and roll bands ever, like I said. So in another interview some years ago, I think it was in 2015, Nikki Sixx said that if Motley Crue was ever honored into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he would probably decline. He would decline the nomination. He said, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has lost touch with art, songwriting craft, lyrics, and influential music. He'd go on to elaborate. It's a fixed old boy network that has lost touch with art, songwriting craft, lyrics, and influential music, and usually has other agendas at hand. Young bands tell me it's a joke, and these bands are the future. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Motley Crue's catalog, including the supersonic Kickstart My Heart, it'll outlast the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by a long shot. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Motley Crue and Kickstart My Heart. What are your memories of this song? What are your memories of the album? What do you think about them being shut out of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? What do you think are some of their greatest songs? What do you think about the turmoil going on right now? Let's have a great discussion about one of the greatest rock and roll bands ever, Motley Crue. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.